We are live in iTorah.com. Good morning, everybody. Beruchim Habayim to everyone. Good morning, everyone. Beruchim Habayim to everyone. Today, Wednesday, the 13th of Menachem Av, corresponding to the 10th of August 2020, and his children, Le'ayun Nishmat, his beloved father and their grandfather, Ben Zahir, Alav Shalom. Additionally, today's class graciously sponsored by Kobe Cohen and family, Yaakov Cohen, Le'ayun Nishmat. The concept of children, the concept of Kiddush, and the concept of Habdalah. So I like to put everything together because there is a correlation between all the words that I just mentioned. So to all of us, when I say the word Kiddush, right away reminds me the Shabbat night, the Friday night prayer ceremony that I do at home, that we all do at home when we come back from the synagogue. Then at the end of the Shabbat, I have Havdalah. Havdalah means to separate. Now, in order, like to welcome the Shabbat, I made a prayer over the wine. When I say to the Shabbat goodbye, I also do it through the wine. But Havdalah is actually much more than a basic prayer on wine. For example, in Havdalah we say, Ben Or LaChoshech, we say to the Almighty, God, give us the mindset to be able to distinguish between the light and darkness. For example, in the morning prayers, we have a series of blessings. After talking about our soul, we say, Hanoten lasechvi bina, le'abhin ben yom uben layla. What's the meaning of that blessing? Literally it means the one who gives to the rooster. That's the meaning in understanding to distinguish between day and night. Let me ask you a question. Why the rabbis put the word sechvi instead of putting tarnegol? Most people call me a rooster, tarnegol. Hen, tarnegolet. Chicken, tarnegolet. Why the Hachamim put the word sechvi? Short answer, because the word sechvi means sechel, the brain. God, give me wisdom so I'm able to distinguish what's right and wrong, what's light and what's darkness, what's holy, what's mundane, what's allowed, what's not allowed. And like this is the first blessing. You know why? The Gemara asks a following question. When it comes to Mosa'e Shabbat, Saturday night Arvit, we do a Tahonantan. After a Tahonen, the first sentence, we say a Tahonantano, like a mini Havdalah. The Gemara asks why our rabbis established this paragraph in the beginning of Atahonen. You know what the Gemara says? The following. Im da'at ain, Havdalah menain. If you have no brain, how are you going to be able to differentiate? So meaning to say, you can be alive, but if you have no brain, you cannot distinguish things. Now many people have brains. Some use it, some don't use it. We hope that everybody uses it. Okay? Because otherwise, if a person has no sechel, life doesn't carry much value. But therefore the Gemara says, you need to understand that we need to protect ourselves. In what sense? We, like it or not, we are the Jewish people. Bottom line. Yes, we were preceded by 3,000 years of Jewish history, even more. To Moshe Rabbeinu alone is 3,300 years. And the question is, how did we survive till today? Based on whatever history brought upon the Jewish people, we should have been part of a museum and maybe a chapter in human history. We discussed the other day the confiscation of property in England in the mid-1200s. Then we spoke of the Under-Crusades. Then we spoke about which was Christianity. You have to understand, as much as we don't see eye to eye with the Arab nations, but the hands of the Christians are much dirtier than the hands of the Muslims. You need to know this historical fact. And I hope nobody is offended with it. But if you follow history, go to the Crusades, go to the Inquisition, and all the chapters of history that follow, church and Christianity fomented, usually in the public speeches, they will incite the masses to act against the Jewish people. Regretfully, this is a chapter of history that cannot be erased. And that's why many times you see the church wants to apologize to the Jewish people. Even Spain and Portugal with the Inquisition. Remember, we learned this the other day. They're trying to do teshuvah. What they are doing, they're giving you a passport. If you want to apply for Spanish passport, which the registration is shut down already, only Portugal is alive temporarily, with a lot of bureaucracy and letters and documentation, etc., to atone, so to speak, for the crimes committed against the Jewish people. Remember what were the three options in Spain? Either you convert into Christianity, either we execute you, or you leave the country empty-handed. You can't sell your properties. You cannot sell your properties. Yani you have a home, you have cars, you have factory. If you want to leave the country empty-handed. The last exodus of Spain during the time of the Inquisition was approximately 300,000 Jewish people. That was the last batch that left. Go forward. Europe.
Inquisition, yeah?
Yes, Inquisition, sure. Fast forward. Europe, Ukraine. And we're not saying the Ukraine of today, the Ukraine of yesteryear. Many Yugoslavia, you had in France, you had in England, Hungary, Poland, all these countries, how much they are, but guess what? There is thousands, if not millions, of Jewish death in those lands. God forbid. And yet, with all of the above, we are alive. We are physically and spiritually alive. And this is something that we, in the night of Pesach, we say, Shebechol dor vador omrim aleinu lechalotenu. In every generation, one generation can be called Inquisition. Another generation is called the Cossacks. Another generation is called the Holocaust. Another generation is called pogroms. Another generation is called Holocaust and terrorism. But you know what is the worst? The silent Holocaust. There's no tolerance. Silent Holocaust. Tolerance is the opposite. Very good. What is silent Holocaust? You want the real deal?
Yeah.
Assimilation. It kills people without making a sound. Not physically, spiritually. As I said in the previous class, we are the continuity of our forefathers. All the way to Abraham Avinu. Because I guarantee you that if your parents didn't live in a proper way with an example, you will not be here today. And your children will not be here today. And I know your children. Where that came from. That's the transmission, one generation to the other. But God forbid, if a Jew assimilates, which this is what's happening in America today, don't kid yourself. The worst enemy of American Jewry is assimilation. Forget about Republican and Democrats and all the madness that's there. In America, close to 70% assimilation. So every time that a Jew marries a Jewish wife, it's a reason to celebrate. Because 7 out of 10 don't.
7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
Whose fault is that?
Excuse me?
Whose fault is that?
I give you a lot of answers. Number 1, parents. Number 2, maybe grandparents. Number 3, your environment. Nobody's fault. You have examples, especially you. You have examples because you come from a wonderful community.
You have examples, sir.
Of course, I know you don't have examples. Don't say that. I know where you come from. For security reasons, I will not identify you. Okay? Okay? But you come from a good. Who was your grandfather? Don't answer me. A great Chacham. Correct? Chazak. So you have a good background. You need just to activate it. Not you, you're a good fellow, Baruch Hashem. But all of us. And the worst part of this is that there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. You cannot say, oh, I'm Jewish, my wife is Jewish, automatically my kids are going to follow in the proper way. Maybe they follow some, but if we don't bring Judaism to a practical and to a functional way of life, that's where we get into trouble. And that's why our Torah tells us, make Havdalah, the famous Chaim of Volozhin. If the Jew doesn't make Kiddush, the Goyim will make Havdalah. If a Jew doesn't invest, you tell me, oh, I sent my kids to Jewish school. Look what I got, rotten change. Guess what? I will ask you, which school did you send your child to? Okay, you sent them to a nice school, Hazak. But what was life at home? Did the school and the home somehow created a good balance? Or the school was one way and the home was another way? Or maybe the home was good, but the school wasn't good. So then you have an explosion. You know why? Because we're causing confusion to the student. We're causing confusion to the children. And that's why the Gemara combines marriage, children, Kiddush, and Havdalah. And I repeat, I don't mean the ceremonial prayer. I mean the way of life. And I repeat, as the Baal Shem Tov says, a Jew's mission in the world is to elevate the materialism into spirituality. For example, you have on the table, okay, Baruch Hashem, the sambusak ran out. Hazaku Baruch. Okay, so you have a mini Danish, right?
Yeah.
What do? Not me, but what people do. Not me because I try to avoid it, right? Okay, look at my plate, only eggs, no sambusak. Although it was offered, IPO, before the trade came out, okay? And what do? Oh, I'm going to eat something. Let me say a beracha. I finish eating, I give thanks to God. For those who pray in the 8 o'clock minyan, Remember the halacha that we mentioned? Since most of you prayed in the next minyan, I'm going to tell you the halacha of today. The halacha of today discusses encouraging parents to make netilat yadayim to their babies when they wake up in the morning. Netilah, without beracha. Just to start training them from a young age. And the halacha says you can train your children to recite berachot even when they're a baby. Baruch atah Adonai la 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 la. Even though you're saying Hashem's name, and even though they're saying a beracha every bite they take, this investment that you're making now as a baby, as a toddler, as an infant, is giving the child an unbelievable foundation. So when he grows up and starts going to school and starts developing to become a bar mitzvah, it's not going to be a foreign language, which regretfully happens more often than people think. And why these things happen? Because we did not invest on ourselves, and we did not invest in our children. And that's why the Torah says you need to make Havdalah. And why? I have to catch a flight, so I'm going to finish very soon. I have to travel. I'm human. Okay? For the iTorah audience, the live broadcasting Be'ezat Hashem will resume next Wednesday morning.
Amen.
For you, you will have Rabbi Moshe Ajmi from the 8:20 minyan to take over my class in person, Be'ezat Hashem. And for the 8 o'clock, we have one of the young rabbinical scholars of the Kollel to come and to give the class. So we cover, Baruch Hashem, everything to the best of our abilities. Now, as I was saying, what was I saying?
Let's pray your Friday on time.
That I know. The halakha that I was mentioning before. The halakha says, start practicing with your child. Because the Gemara calls this Girsa Deyankuta. In English it means what a child learns from childhood. You ever see a person gets invited to the Sefer Torah? They go up to the Aliyah, they know how to say it. Barechu et Hashem mevorach, la 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 la. Tell him to say Birkat HaGomel, he cannot read it. Why not? Because he remembers only the Beracha from the Bar Mitzvah. Because it was drilled into the child. No more than that. And therefore the Halakha says, Hanoch lana'ar al pi darko. Gam ki yaskin lo yasur mimenna. Every child is to be educated in a certain way. Not two children are alike. Even though that they share the same parents, same grandparents, same home, each child has a different way of understanding and reasoning. To a child, you may have to praise a lot in order for him or her to perform. To another child, you have to say it to them once and they do it good from the beginning. Each person, and that's, by the way, that's a mistake that some parents do, and I include myself. What worked 50 years ago doesn't work today. And what it works for one child doesn't mean that automatically it's going to work on the other child. And that's the reason why we'll finish with this. One of the things that our rabbis encourage us, number one, to pray for a suitable wife, and to pray for Shalom Bayit, but also to pray for the spiritual well-being of the children. Of their children. Sure, you can pray for the entire Jewish world, but your responsibility, priority in life is your marriage and your children. That's your biggest priority in life. Then comes the rest of the world. Because if your home is not good, God forbid, and your parenting is not there, you're missing the boat. And that's our rabbis put the concept of marriage, Havdalah, Kiddush, and parenting on the same Gemara in Masechet Shavuot to remind us that if we want to preserve the chain, or the links of the chain that began many generations back, we invest in ourselves and we transmit the beautiful message to our children. Once again, Elias, Hazako Baruch, the entire Sabak family, for graciously sponsoring today's breakfast, La'ilui Nishmat, the beloved father, grandfather, Haim Ben Zahir, and as well by the Cohen family for sponsoring the class, La'ilui Nishmat, Rivka Bat Naomi, Alea Shalom. We're going to say Kaddish, Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Hanania ben Akashia Omer, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל, לפיכך הרבה להם תורה מצוות שנאמר,